The beautiful Duke disguised as a man is actually a cunning emperor who has been temporarily stunned. She who originally lived in a remote village was told by a strange uncle one night that she was the biological daughter of Duke Esther and was immediately taken back to the ducal mansion overnight. Upon arriving at the mansion, she learned that the Duke could no longer have children due to a diagnosis. However, he could not let the family line be broken, so he brought her back from the village. Upon seeing her, he was disgusted that she was a woman, as the heirs of the family had always been men. So the Duke came up with a bad idea, to treat her a woman as a man, and thus changed her name to Rosetta. She then realized that she had transmigrated and become a deeply affectionate man disguised as a woman. Although Rosetta appeared only a few times in the book, her gentle and delicate personality and her appearance comparable to the female protagonist made her the white moonlight in the hearts of all readers. A year later, Rosetta had perfectly mastered this body. Under the strict guidance of the Duke, she displayed her feminine upbringing to the fullest. Even standing before the Emperor, she would not make the slightest mistake. Unexpectedly, during this visit to the palace, she encountered the villainous Wei Wyan from the book. When the Emperor specially prepared a reception for children of her age, she walked in and a little girl with pink hair, her eyes teary, bumped into her arms. But the girl was not at all apologetic. She sincerely pushed her away. Rosetta scratched her head awkwardly, completely unaware that the villainous Wei Wyan from the book, as a child, was actually a cute and soft little demoness. And because she couldn't find the crown prince, she was crying and shedding tears. Rosetta noticed and unhesitatingly handed her a handkerchief. Realizing her own disheveled state, Wei Wyan blushed with embarrassment. The boy slowly chewed on an apple, looking at the person before him with a hint of relief. He never expected that Duke Esk, who was like a viper, could have such a gentle child as Rosetta. So he gave her a piece of advice: you'd better stay away from that watery girl. Otherwise she'll cling to you wherever you go. Before Rosetta could understand, the boy jumped off the railing, because Wei Wyan, who was hiding behind the door, had witnessed all of this. While talking to the crown prince, Wei Wyan kept peeking from behind the door and was caught by a maid. After the maid left, Wei Wyan cautiously sat down next to Rosetta. Her eyes occasionally glanced at the beautiful boy. Rosetta, amused, couldn't help but ask, "Is there something you want to say?" The next second, the girl was like a startled rabbit, stammering that the handkerchief was dirty but she would buy a new one to return to Rosetta. Rosetta said it was okay, but Wei Wyan mistakenly thought she was looking down on her. She quickly counted on her fingers, saying she would buy hundreds of them to return. Only when Rosetta said she really didn't need them did the girl give up. Because her hair was messed up, Wei Wyan went to the dressing table to comb it herself. But because her curly hair was too difficult to manage, the more she combed, the messier her hair became, and she finally cried out in distress. Seeing this, Rosetta quickly went to her side. She carefully combed her hair, which made Wei Wyan's heart flutter. However, at this moment, Rosetta's peripheral vision caught sight of a blonde person peeking outside the window, and this person was the crown prince who had given her advice not long ago. Rosetta's toes curled up in embarrassment, but when she turned her head, the figure had disappeared. Finally, it was time to leave. The Duke gave her a look, telling Rosetta it was time to go. But Wei Wyan clung to her clothes and refused to let go. This startled both fathers, and the girl's father looked even more embarrassed. He tried to coax his daughter, but the stubborn Wei Wyan remained motionless. Only when Rosetta said that the clothes were being pulled too hard and her waist was hurting did Wei Wyan let go. Her father took the opportunity to hug her, and they finally returned home. She thought the matter was over. But unexpectedly, during the dance class the next day, Rosetta encountered the little pink fox again. She was stunned. After all, she was the only student the teacher had. Wei Wyan couldn't have appeared here by chance. Only then did she fully understand the crown prince's advice. "So Miss Wei Wyan, did you follow me here?" The girl guiltily turned her head away, saying it was all a coincidence. Rosetta helplessly exposed her lie. Wei Wyan had no choice but to explain that she had indeed followed her, because she wanted to get closer to Rosetta. She tied her hair for her. Unlike others, Rosetta didn't dislike her. And there was another important reason. Rosetta was successfully amused by the girl. Wei Wyan was very different from the one in the novel, so it should be okay to improve their relationship, right? She slowly reached out to Wei Wyan and intended to make friends with her. Seeing this, the girl unhesitatingly grasped Rosetta's hand. And so Wei Wyan became Rosetta's first friend in this world. The Saintess was born with healing powers, while the Esther family, who inherited the bloodline of necromans, possessed the power of curses. Rosetta, disguised as a man, was a genius in curses, and her talent was unparalleled. As long as she added power to her words during use, and could use the power of curses for a better display for Rosetta. The Duke raised his hand above the flower and silently chanted with her. The next second, the entire flower lost its vitality. But when it was time for Rosetta to show it, his body was racked with pain and blood spurted out with his coughs. The Duke sneered and ordered his attendant to send Rosetta away. Looking at the flower bud that showed no signs of life, the Duke blamed Rosetta in his heart, mixed with the blood of commoners. But the next second, all the flowers in the courtyard instantly lost their vitality. The Viper Duke's lips curled into an evil smile. So Rosetta wasn't incapable, but too powerful. Rosetta was startled awake the next day. The fear of excessive power seemed to linger around him. Fortunately, the Duke sent him a magic item that could control magic. After this, he could flexibly control himself, and thus fell in love with this course. Because of his outstanding performance at the palace last time, the Duke granted him the right to go out freely. On this day of going out, Master brought a child wearing a wolf mask. Because magic was cast on him, he couldn't see the face behind the mask. But he didn't know that. The boy had already seen through his disguise as a woman pretending to be a man. In the noisy and crowded market, the distance between the two was 100,000 miles. Rosetta motioned for him to come closer, saying he wouldn't eat him. The boy then slowly walked over, too shy to even reveal his name. Rosetta had to temporarily name him Inuo. Looking at the boy's small body, Rosetta couldn't help but order 2 steaks for him. He also remembered the 2 matches at Kaotang. How could such thin arms protect me? I feel like I should be the one protecting Inuo. Hearing this, the boy firmly stated, I can protect you. Rosetta didn't know what these words contained, but after this, he never saw Inuo again. Because in his blind spot, the boy's spirit had completely collapsed. When the day of their promised meeting arrived, little Lolita eagerly threw herself into Rosetta's arms. Because there were special guests today, Wei Wei stammered and couldn't even speak clearly. Rosetta thought with his toes. Rosetta tried to adjust, but Wei Wei quickly picked up the teacup. And then quickly turned her head away. After drinking the tea without hesitation, the next second the teacup slipped from her hand. The scalding tea burned the little girl's hand red. Rosetta stroked the girl's head and gently comforted her, saying it was okay. Then he carefully called a maid for her, but the burning pain quickly surged. The girl could no longer hold back her tears and cried out. At this moment, a fiery gaze fixed on the two of them. Rosetta had forgotten about the Yellow Prince, that man who had repeatedly warned him to stay away from Wei Wei. Soon the maid took the scalded Wei Wei away for treatment. Only the two of them were left alone in the large reception room. The Yellow Prince looked at Rosetta with a relieved expression. I clearly reminded you to stay away from Wei Wei that day. But you insisted on running into Wei Wei's arms, Rosetta explained. It was just because they were friends. The Yellow Prince quietly leaned closer to Rosetta and smiled meaningfully. If you were just friends, Wei Wei wouldn't have actively apologized to him that day, and even asked me to be his friend. Rosetta immediately thought of that day, but he didn't expect that Wei Wei would use this sentence on the Yellow Prince so quickly. But the Yellow Prince was indeed interested because of this. Rosetta's mind flashed. Does your highness like Miss Wei Wei? And since the three of them attended the tea party together, Rosetta discovered that whenever he visited Wei Wei's house, he always encountered trouble. Every time he accompanied his father to the palace for sword practice, Wei Wei would always appear in the Yellow Palace in time. The two seemed to have some kind of agreement, so they spent more time together. Unknowingly, they also became good friends. Rosetta was initially worried that the main quest hadn't started yet, and Wei Wei and the Yellow Prince would get married. The story would end with their happy lives. But as they spent more time together, Rosetta realized he was overthinking. Although Wei Wei and Shi Deer had a good relationship, they basically bickered whenever they met. The previous awkwardness had completely disappeared, replaced by a sense of disdain. Why do you always let Rosetta tie your hair for you? What's it to you? Who was it that cried and apologized to me before, and asked me to be his friend? I must have been blind back then to like a guy like you. This scene made Rosetta unable to help but lose her temper. Scared the two allies into stopping their argument. In fact, he was not angry. He just felt too happy, but such a life did not last long. Rosetta's father encountered a landslide 2 years later, and then he died, so he took over his father's burden. But there are always some rats who want to cause trouble. Wei Wei hid in my arms and breathed when she was little. But looking back, I never lent my embrace to His Highness. It's okay not to cry, I just want to comfort His Highness. Wen Yan Shi De buried his head in Rosetta's shoulder and cried heartbrokenly again. Suddenly an umbrella covered the two of them again. Wei Wei's red eyes appeared behind the two. No one spoke, letting the pain remain on the rainy day. Time flies in a nameless tavern. People were discussing the 3 great beauties of the empire. One of them was young Master Eske, who disguised himself as a man. Because the old man from Visu had wicked intentions towards him, he shamelessly wanted to possess him, but in the next second, the man was pressed to the table and rubbed. A magic sword fell on the man's head. His face turned pale instantly because it was none other than it was Wolf, who had recently become a terror. In an instant the people in the tavern fled madly. The Visu man crawled in front of him, begging him to spare him because he still had to see his wife and son Ano. Wolf sneered, and then the rain fell. The Visu man died on the spot. Wolf muttered, Ano is a name that brings back memories. After the funeral of the former king, the 3 childhood friends who were inseparable never saw each other again. The crown prince was busy with the coronation ceremony. Rosetta was busy firmly grasping the duke's mansion. Wei Wei was busy in the social circle, although there were still letters, but they could no longer meet as often as they did in their youth. After finishing the high-intensity work, Rosetta could finally rest properly. Rarely taking off the magic item that concealed her gender, Rosetta born a daughter was stunning. Even the maid who had served her for many years was moved. However, magic items have also increased in recent years, and one must choose carefully each time one is worn. After finishing work, Rosetta rushed to the palace early in the morning. Upon arrival, she found that Shida had been working for several days without sleep. Rosetta tentatively asked if she needed help. She originally just wanted to be polite, but unexpectedly fell into Shida's trap. In front of the terrifying person, she was too embarrassed not to help. so she had no choice but to take the documents with a stiff upper lip. Unexpectedly Wei Wei and suddenly burst into the office at this moment. Her tone was tinged with a hint of grievance. Why didn't you two call me? Fortunately she heard that Duke Eske's carriage had entered the palace while shopping. Otherwise they would have been left alone. Shida chuckled. I didn't expect Wei Wei and to like me so much. The two then started arguing as usual. Rosetta, who was looking at the documents, was suddenly stunned. A very severe sandstorm occurred in a certain region. She remembered that this was the beginning of the novel. Because this matter was not handled well, coupled with the tracking and surveillance of the wicked Wei Wei, and Shida eventually became a tyrant. But the current situation is different from the book. Has the plot changed? Her thoughts were gradually drifting apart when she suddenly saw two people discussing her. Rosetta couldn't help but laugh out loud, finally recovering. Your brows have been furrowed all along. Rosetta no longer hesitated. She then pushed the documents away. Shida who was looking at the documents, had a solemn expression. Just as the two were at a loss, Wei Wei and raised her small hand. She had a way to solve the travel problem. The Grey Duke's family had been sending her invitations. She originally wanted to refuse, but now she could have Rosetta as a companion. Go with her. Rosetta also felt that this plan was feasible. She immediately said that she would travel with Wei Wei, and the beautiful Duke disguised as a man became the secret crush of the sealed mage. Any remarks unfavorable to young Master Eske, Aino would nip them in the bud, but as long as young Master Eske had a need, she would appear at the first opportunity. Not long ago, a severe sandstorm occurred in the Tilian region. If it could not be resolved perfectly, Shida would suffer the double blow of the Emperor's death and public opinion, eventually becoming a complete tyrant, and many people would die as a result. Rosetta could not bear to see such cruel things happen, so she decided to go and resolve it, and before that, she decided to take advantage of the night. She planned to find the key person who could resist the sandstorm. As the Saintess descended from the sky, the Blackwood in the novel also appeared. But the Saintess did not appear. The situation was urgent and Rosetta could not wait that long, so she had to find the heavenly mage in advance. Although she was a genius, her master who raised her since childhood treated her as an experimental subject. Blackwood brought immense pain, causing her to completely collapse mentally as a child. So after she gained great power, the first thing she did was to kill her master with her own hands. But because her master was a sage in the magic tower, after that she was hunted by the magic sect. Before meeting the heroine, she had been staying in a hotel. This is the inn right in front of Rosetta's eyes. With a nervous heart, Rosetta walked into the inn. As soon as she entered the door, the boss enthusiastically came up to greet her. Rosetta didn't delay, and directly said she was looking for someone. Unexpectedly a scream suddenly came from upstairs. The boss grumbled, I knew this would happen. I told you not to bet with that madman Wolf. Following the boss' gaze, Rosetta had a guess as she walked over carelessly. She saw a tall black-haired man, uncontrollably crying in front of a blood-stained table. But upon noticing Rosetta walking over, the man smiled with relief. Are you going to bet with me too? Rosetta said that she just wanted to ask Wolf to do something, but the man directly stepped in front of her, looking down at Rosetta condescendingly. Why should I help you? Rosetta couldn't help but feel disheartened. She knew Wolf wouldn't help easily, so she had already made the worst-case plan when she came. But just as Rosetta was about to tie him up, Wolf suddenly smiled strangely. I only do things that interest me, but by chance, I am very interested in you. He put away his clumsy demeanor. Without explaining why, Rosetta briefly described the mission, to eliminate the sandstorm in the Talian region. But that was not a place one could enter and exit freely. Wolf needed to disguise himself as her attendant. Rosetta initially thought the man wouldn't agree easily, because she wasn't sure she could persuade the person in front of her. But the next second, the man unexpectedly agreed. He briefly introduced himself as Rosetta, the newly appointed Duke of the Esther family. The man listened and smiled, as if he had already known about this matter. Then let me introduce myself too. My name is... But before he could finish, Rosetta interrupted. I know your name is Wolf. The man paused, muttering the name Wolf. Then with a swift movement he flashed in front of Rosetta, using his long hands to grip the back of his head. Then I'll ask for your guidance, my Duke. In the end, Aino became Rosetta's attentive butler. Soon the group began their journey to Talion. At first Rosetta worried that he would act impulsively. Unexpectedly he now acted like an honest person. Not only did he thoughtfully prepare ice water that could be unlocked, but he also truly fulfilled his responsibilities as a butler. Rosetta's favorability towards him increased, because the three little ones were always insecure since childhood. Even a turn or a smile would cause people to gossip. Rosetta was already used to these gazes, but unexpectedly just as she was about to leave, Wolf quietly approached her. Rosetta, your blood pressure is rising sharply. The banquet is about to begin. You need to get ready quickly. Although Rosetta was attending the banquet as Vivian's companion, she didn't have the opportunity to approach Duke Grey, so she had to find a way to make him come to her. Ms. Vivian, may I have the honor of dancing with you? The girl's eyes sparkled. It's my honor. Just as Rosetta had predicted, whenever she danced with Vivian, all eyes would be drawn to them. Even Duke Grey, who was extremely busy, immediately withdrew, but his attention was always solely on Vivian, completely ignoring Rosetta beside her. A surge of anger welled up in her heart. He directly inserted himself between the two. You're blushing. I am Duke Esther. Then he shoved the letter into Duke Grey's hand. But the man looked at it with an expression of ignorance. Rosetta's eyes narrowed. She knew the other party was lying. So if possible before leaving here, I'd like to go to Tallinn. Duke Gray nervously waved his hand, implying that once Rosetta solved the problem, they would be fine. She couldn't help but sigh inwardly. What an ungrateful person. At midnight after Vivian and Rosetta arrived, Rosetta was about to return to her room to rest, when unexpectedly Wolf suddenly appeared behind her. Your Grace, please help me comb my hair. The man had disguised himself for 18 years, but was seen through by a magic sealing mage revealing his female identity. This aroused the intense fighting spirit of the obsessive madman. After merely helping Vivian tie her hair, Aino secretly worked for 3 days and 3 nights. It wasn't until 3 a.m. when resting that he found Rosetta that day and asked her to comb his hair. And he wanted Vivian's same hairstyle. Rosetta was speechless, but to avoid trouble she obediently followed Wolf's request. After his hair was tied, the man was as sweet as if he had eaten honey. After he left humming a tune in his newly bought clothes, Rosetta finally couldn't hold on and fell asleep. Who knew the little man hadn't left at all? He waited until Rosetta was fast asleep before opening the door. He gently stroked Rosetta's cheek. It's still the same as before. Looking at the sleeping face, he recalled the past. It turned out that many years ago he had already seen through Rosetta's disguise. He also knew that beneath the appearance of a little boy there was a beautiful and moving little girl hidden. He told everything to Hirori beside him, but Hirori was taken away overnight. After meeting the magician master, his spirit was completely destroyed. Now he is a monster who cannot feel any emotion. But now he has developed the same feelings for Rosetta. And it's completely He held me tightly in his arms. The man who was pointed out seemed unusually excited. He couldn't help but tighten his grip on the hand around his waist. I haven't received my reward yet. I can't let my employer get hurt. Rosetta found that Vivian's side was being blocked to an outrageous degree. There wasn't a speck of dust on my side. I knew this must be the good deed of Wolf. So she told Vivian not to worry and that she would resolve all of this soon. Then she roared at the person behind her, do you still remember my commission? What you need to deal with is the vortex in the center. Hearing this, the man jumped into the water without hesitation, muttering strange incantations. The beam of light reminded him of someone. That was his childhood playmate Annie, who suddenly disappeared. Rosetta didn't expect that guy's strength to be so formidable. After things were over he had to interrogate her thoroughly. Unexpectedly Aino fainted directly. He had no choice but to wait for her to wake up. Duke Gray smiled and invited Vivian to stay for a few more days. But Vivian refused without even thinking, and demanded the reward for resolving the disaster, specifically asking for the holy beast Shirju. But because it was extremely rare, Duke Gray originally only wanted to stingily give one. Under Vivian's offensive he finally compromised. In the end Vivian rode alone and Rosetta carried Aino at the tail. Seeing that the girl was so tired from the journey that she couldn't open her eyes, Rosetta gently leaned over and said softly, sleep well. I'll wake you up when we get to the mansion. A moment later the girl fell asleep in Rosetta's arms, and as the ruler of a country Shider has been disturbed by other matters recently, because he hadn't heard from Rosetta and Vivian for several days, he couldn't concentrate on his political affairs until a letter of peace arrived. His worries of many days were finally swept away. The next morning he woke up. Rosetta subconsciously called out to Wolf. It had only been a few days, but he had gotten used to the presence of that unreliable butler. But as the darkness descended, Rosetta had a premonition that the heroine would appear soon. Lee Yuna was originally an ordinary high school student. After traveling through time and space she became a revered saint. Most people liked her straightforwardness, but only Rosetta, who had learned about the pillar, knew about the forces behind her. Shider and Vivian's relationship was good now, but if the story were to develop according to the original, the two would drift apart due to Lee Yuna's arrival. Vivian wouldn't hate someone for no reason, so if that day ever came she would definitely stand on Vivian's side. Now one Aino was already a headache. In the original work the heroine gave her a name. Wolf went crazy because of it, but now she was the one who named the mastermind behind the scenes first. This way, Rosetta guessed that the plot might take a turn. But no matter what, it was best to ask for her opinion now. Rosetta went to the guest room. Upon entering she found Aino lying quietly on the bed. Overuse of magic has side effects and she had been unconscious for several days. If Rosetta's guess was correct, Wolf had completely taken Aino as his own name, so she tentatively changed her name to Aino. The next second, those green eyes suddenly opened and pulled Rosetta, who was in front of the bed, under her, and looked down at her with two unnatural blushes on her face. What did you just call me? Can you say it again? But the next second, a sword was instantly placed at her throat. The emperor did not know that his good brother was a woman, but seeing him pressed under a strange man, when Rosetta called out Aino's name after a long absence, Ren Jing went crazy and immediately pulled the person under her. Her cheeks were slightly flushed. Can you call me that name again? Looking at the man who had fallen into a frenzy, Rosetta suddenly felt that things were not going well. Shider happened to appear at the door. Seeing the scene before her she first paused, then quickly drew her sword and placed it at Aino's throat. Who am I? What am I doing here? But looking at the sword blade within reach, Aino cut her finger with it. Angrily she licked it with her tongue and retorted, who are you? Hearing this, Shider was instantly enraged. She was the emperor known to everyone in the empire, but this person in front of her said she didn't Recognize her. Ano just smiled and said, is it necessary to know who you are? Seeing the situation at a stalemate, Rosetta finally couldn't stand it anymore. She first told Scheider to stand up and said let's talk about it properly. Then she asked Ano to get off her. But as soon as Rosetta stood up, Scheider immediately pulled her behind her. Seeing this, Rosetta tried to explain, she's someone I know. Your Highness, there's no need to be so defensive. Scheider was still very agitated. She was above you earlier. Rosetta emphasized that nothing happened. Ano didn't hit her or threaten her. And it's better to resolve the argument quickly now. Otherwise 3 men in one room can easily lead to misunderstandings. She told Ano to wait here and not to move around carelessly. Then she pulled Scheider to the reception room again. After some questioning, it was learned that Scheider originally intended to go upstairs to find Rosetta, but saw the door on the left side of the lens open and heard Rosetta's voice. So Scheider walked in without thinking. Unexpectedly, he saw a flying guy on Rosetta. After hearing this, Rosetta breathed a sigh of relief. Luckily only Scheider saw. Otherwise this matter would be bad even if it was just spread a little. There would be rumors that Duke Astor liked men. Unexpectedly, the Emperor's face was extremely sincere after hearing this. Seeing that the last trace of reason was about to disappear, the Rosetta Alliance began to explain. I mean, 2 men alone can easily be mistaken for strange things. Hearing this, Scheider suddenly became extremely shy. Subconsciously touched her flushed cheeks. What was she imagining? What could happen between 2 men staying together? But then again, who exactly was that strange guy? Scheider had never seen her before. Her name is Ano and she is a helper who helped resolve the sandstorm. Rosetta publicly claimed that she was her housekeeper, but according to the original plot, Ano and Scheider should not have met so early. She also could not reveal the other party's identity as a magician. Unexpectedly, Scheider kept asking. Rosetta could only explain that it was to resolve the sandstorm. She needed a helper who could use magical tools. So she hired her with money, and Scheider understood. But she still seemed preoccupied, probably with something important to ask her. So Rosetta said she would organize a report on how this matter was resolved and submit it to Scheider. Hearing this, the man finally put his mind at ease. Then he'll go back and wait for your news. But on the way back, she always thought of that scene in her mind. And the more she thought about it, the more it felt wrong. And dared to tell her that Rosetta's relationship with that man was unusual. Seeing the misunderstanding at a glance, she instantly lost her mind. When she came to her senses, she was already holding a sword in her hand. Although Rosetta said that person was just an insignificant passerby, Scheider instinctively felt that guy was definitely not simple. Her eyes were like a beast facing prey. Although Rosetta had explained the details one by one, her mood was still so bad. Is it because her friend was snatched away that she was extremely angry? After a while she strengthened this idea, it must be so. So a few days later in the palace, Scheider started asking about Ano again. Rosetta said she had already left the Duke's mansion. Even she herself did not expect her to be so naive. But after Scheider read Rosetta's report, he absent-mindedly asked again. My foster father won't have any more contact with that dark guy, will he? We won't meet again, our transaction is over. Hearing this, Scheider was completely relieved. That's great, she's so arrogant, I've long disliked her. Rosetta did not expect His Majesty to dislike Ano so much. Rosetta came this time not only to submit the report, but also told Scheider that she would be holding a banquet at Esther Castle. She came this time to send an invitation and to hold this banquet. Rosetta was extremely busy because there was no hostess in the castle. She had to personally confirm everything. Luckily, the day before the banquet, Vivian came to help her with the final checks and Rosetta was able to rest for a while. But as soon as she wanted to take off the magic props for the event, she suddenly found something wrong. Her palm had unknowingly returned to its original large size. So she quickly ran to the mirror and sure enough, she had unknowingly returned to her female form. The beautiful Duke, who had been in men's clothing for 18 years. Her identity was broken by a single magic spell. To completely possess the beautiful young Duke, the cruel man went mad and damaged all the magic props she used to hide her gender. Even the magic earrings she was wearing now had no magic left in them. For this, Rosetta had to strain her tired body and find someone to repair the magic props before the second day arrived. After disguising herself, Rosetta left the Duke's mansion overnight. Until she reached the depths of an old alley, she finally stopped and carefully examined her feet. The moment she walked into the house with your leadership, the craftsman inside recognized her at once. It seemed a distinguished guest had arrived. Brother Shu began to carefully examine the broken magic props. He saw some dangerous traces on it, and seeing Rosetta's confusion, the man continued to explain. Where magicians pass, their magic power will remain. And this is called a trace. There was no defect in the magic props he made. It was just that the person who damaged them had too powerful magic. If a device that conceals magic power is worn yet still discovered, it can also be explained that the other party is someone extremely sensitive to magic power. In front of them, no matter what magical items are worn, it's useless. Hearing this, Rosetta couldn't help but feel a chill down her spine. In other words, Sinos had seen through his disguise as a man from the very beginning. People sensitive to magic power are rare. They are, as the saying goes, able to see through everything. No matter what magical items are worn, it's useless. After asking Shu Jie to repair the item, in front of Esther Castle filled with the cawing of crows, a figure wearing a hood appeared again. Rosetta thought the arrival of Scheider and Vivian indeed allowed his tense mind to relax. However, the time for the three to gather was very limited. Vivian and Scheider had to leave and return soon. Rosetta also did not intend to wait at the banquet. Then she quietly returned to her room. The night grew darker, but Anna Ju, who went out early in the morning to get him magic items, had not yet returned. The temporary magic item given to him by Xu Zhe could only maintain the decree for 2 days. So he had to get the new magic item as soon as possible. Rosetta wanted to walk on the balcony, but there were cawing crows all around. Crows symbolize bad luck. Rosetta had a premonition. Perhaps the saintess would descend from the sky at any moment. At this moment the crows circling in the air suddenly fell. In his eyes it turned into a tall illegal man. "Your Grace, we meet again." Before Rosetta could ask, Ano quickly ran forward and placed his large hand on Rosetta's cheek. But his mind jolted and he slapped Ano's hand away. "Don't touch me." The man drooped his face aggrievedly. "Don't you like it?" He wanted to hear Rosetta call him Ano every day. He wanted to be indispensable to Rosetta. Rosetta confirmed that her disguise as a man had been discovered. The words "do you like me?" almost blurted out, but then she suddenly remembered that the saintess was about to appear. Ano would also fall in love with the saintess soon, so this question seemed redundant. But she still hoped that Ano would keep her secret, not reveal her identity as a woman. Seeing this, Ano unhesitatingly took Rosetta's hand. Unexpectedly at this moment Rosetta chanted a strange spell. She planted a curse on Ano. As long as the man spoke of this matter, he would immediately die, but the man showed no sign of resistance. Seeing this, Rosetta emphasized again, "This is a curse and a promise. If you break the secret of the promise you will die immediately." Unexpectedly he suddenly became shy. "The brand on my heart is like a restraint. Then have I also become your private property?" She cupped Rosetta's face again. "Then can I touch you?" Rosetta felt speechless for some reason. Reggie quickly retreated several hundred steps. "You can go now." Ano kept looking back reluctantly. It seemed that today was not the right time. Reggie transformed into a crow again and disappeared from Rosetta's sight. The 3 little ones at the banquet agreed to meet the next day. But Rosetta had a headache from the hangover. Vivian was so worried that she wanted the coachman to stop the carriage. But Rosetta refused. She remembered that in the novel, the saintess seemed to descend from the sky on a sunny day. And today was also a sunny day, so she wanted to confirm it herself. Unexpectedly, as soon as she secretly landed, a figure descended from the sky like a prophecy. She treated the male lead as a good friend, but the male lead developed ulterior motives towards her. Although he didn't know Rosetta was a woman, Scheider had carefully selected a bronze-colored bouquet for her. Even Vivian, who was a girl, didn't have this. Seeing this, she couldn't help but complain, "Your Majesty doesn't give me a girl flowers, but gives them to Rosetta, the male lead." In response, Scheider said that Vivian's thinking was too narrow-minded. But as the two argued, Scheider's gaze towards Rosetta gradually became ambiguous. But when she met Rosetta's eyes, she retracted her gaze. She turned to pick flowers for the only lady present. Vivian couldn't help but complain. "Although Scheider is very good-looking, he is very insidious and cunning." Rosetta retorted, "Don't I look handsome?" Vivian said indignantly, "That's not it. Your Majesty is a handsome hunk. Rosetta is a beautiful hunk." Her incoherent words made Rosetta laugh heartily. But Vivian looked as if she had seen something. She called out to Rosetta, noticing something in the sky in the background. Rosetta remembered the scene of the saintess' appearance in the original work. She shouted, "Your Majesty, be careful." Scheider followed her gaze. He saw a meteor flying straight towards him. Rosetta told Vivian that she would be fine because that's how it was written in the book. Scheider would encounter the saintess who descended from the sky. The air current that arrived in a moment forced Rosetta to close her eyes. The ground beneath her feet shattered inch by inch. The impact of the saintess was so strong. Yet she fell into Scheider's arms like a light feather. Yuna possessed the holy power of the god of light of the Holy Kingdom. Scheider possessed the holy power of the ancient god Hemunia. Rosetta wanted to go forward to check on Scheider, but the man didn't move at all. His eyes were as vacant as a controlled puppet. The woman's name was Yuna. She inexplicably fell into a sewer on her way to school. Then her body uncontrollably fell downwards. When she opened her eyes again, she found herself looking at a man emitting golden light. While her consciousness was still hazy, Yuna heard the sound of a donkey. "You responded to my call. It was I who summoned you this gift." Although Yuna couldn't understand what the voice was saying, she seemed to understand her current situation. A strange smile suddenly appeared on her lips. "Could I be a messenger of the gods?" And the saint descended from heaven. The next day she was on the news. The faculty suggested informing the Pope quickly. The high priest also said he would personally go to the palace. The saint is a gift from heaven and must not be snatched by the emperor of the Hellies Empire. And Siddle was also troubled by this. The next day he summoned all the nobles, including Rosetta. But unlike in the past, Rosetta did not go to the office. Instead she went to the West Castle, which was used to entertain distinguished guests. After pushing the door open, she saw Siddle standing grimly by Yuna's bedside. Seeing that it was Rosetta, he finally showed a relaxed expression. To ease the atmosphere, Rosetta subconsciously made a joke. Was His Majesty attracted by the saint's beauty? But Siddle's expression was very serious. If he were attracted by beauty, he would have been attracted by Rosetta and Vivian long ago. Hearing this, Rosetta sighed with emotion. "So was my appearance considered beautiful?" The sudden change left Siddle exhausted. Rosetta noticed that Siddle did not fall in love with Yuna at first sight as in the novel. Instead, he felt very sensitive about it. Yesterday Siddle's eyes were very dull when he looked at Yuna, but this morning they were much clearer. The news of the saint's descent had spread like wildfire. The nobles in the conference room kept chattering. Annoyed, Rosetta sighed. Then she used curse magic to silence everyone. It was so quiet that only one person's voice could be heard. Siddle also spoke at this time. Today's meeting is to let everyone know the truth of the rumors. But whether to send the saint away, I will make a decision with Duke Esther and Marquis Good. With Rosetta's support, the meeting went quite smoothly. The nobles did not dare to point fingers at him, but the next second, Shi Tungkyu rushed in to report. The great priest of the Helli's temple. Hearing this, Siddle immediately rushed to the West Castle. He slowly opened the door and saw the saint lying quietly. The high priest held her hand, tears streaming down his face. Siddle's face turned grim. He cursed bastard. Ignoring Rosetta's presence, he snatched the high priest's hand and said, "You don't even know how to use it." Brilliant magical light instantly illuminated the crowd. Damn novel setting. The high priest's hand showed no change when he held it. Siddle took a step forward and a light emanated from him. Although it was basically the same as in the novel, Siddle did not have black hair now, so there was no need to send him to the chairman. Then why did the saint still descend? The young emperor, who secretly loved Duke Esther, was captivated by the official pairing. Every time Yuna looked at him with loving eyes, Siddle's heart would skip a beat, but only she understood that it was not love, but an indescribable chilling feeling. The moment they touched Yuna, light emanated from both of them without them realizing it. Seeing the saint finally awake, all the priests knelt down, but her gaze was always fixed on Siddle. However, the sword pointed backward and began to retreat. Only then did the light on their bodies finally disappear. She looked at Rosetta with anxious eyes, and Rosetta quickly arrived at the scene. Logically speaking, someone who transmigrated would need some time to adapt to life here, but Yuna, with just a few words from the priests, wholeheartedly accepted this evil. She, who was used by most people, created a pure evil when no one was paying attention. Looking at the priests who wanted to take Yuna away, and thinking of the natives' infatuation with Yuna, Rosetta felt a doubt in her heart. His Majesty would never be brave. But Siddle simply said that he didn't need to leave. However, at this moment, Marquis de Hart was forever eternal. He insisted that the saint should stay in the Helli's empire. After all, the place where the saint fell was the formation, and she fell into His Majesty's country. But the priests were not to be outdone. Rosetta couldn't drive her away. A marquis couldn't compete at all. If Rosetta fled because of this, Siddle made a decision. He walked towards Yuna, asking her where she wanted to live, the Holy Kingdom or the Helli's empire. But Yuna lowered her head and said she would obey Siddle's destiny. "So, Your Majesty, where do you want me to stay?" In the end, Yuna stayed in the Helli's empire. The priests tried their best to stay together. They believed that the saint would change her mind. But Rosetta could see through it. They didn't just want to stay by the saint's side, scolding Rosetta as if she couldn't get her disciples to obey, only knowing how to control the fast legs of the purple boat. Rosetta had long been accustomed to such patient obedience. She wouldn't get discouraged by this either, but the hateful captain couldn't stand it. So he immediately counterattacked. A group of stinky, gossiping divine officials. Would they be of any help to the saintess? She only allowed the operations officer to be a tutor. But the divine officials were still responsible for the subsequent bargaining. Rosetta was punished and couldn't afford it, so she used the ominous power they spoke of to make this group of people who prided themselves on their high aspirations shut up obediently. Seeing that everyone couldn't say a word, the furrowed brows of Shu and Suo so she had to act like an adult to protect the little princess who had been doted on since childhood. This was also the first time the three of them had met since the saintess descended. Vivian had been crying all these days she was locked up, fearing abandonment by His Majesty and Rosette. She also accidentally unlocked her talent for painting when she was bored. Her Tsunere look made Rosetta laugh heartily. Vivian's face also turned red. The two of them playfully bickered happily. Siddle's face was full of worries. "You had been crossing your legs since the beginning." But Siddle was generally indifferent to this. But how could this hide it from someone who had known her for many years? "Although I was a little embarrassed. But for a while I had a crush on myself. So no matter what you do, you can't escape the court of me and Rosette." Siddle couldn't help but laugh. She had forgotten. "Miss used to have a crush on me for a while." Even though Siddle deliberately made a joke to change the subject. But Rosetta also knew that Vivian was sick. Was it related to the saintess? "Since His Majesty summoned us, please tell us whatever you need to." Vivian instantly became angry. Rosette didn't open the door at all. It was all because of that saintess. She was confined by her family for 7 days and not allowed to go out. Even she couldn't make His Majesty fall in love. The saintess' influence on His Majesty was so severe. Only at the very end did Siddle return to her senses from the baby. She had experienced some strange things these past few days. She definitely wouldn't control her body again. Especially when she saw the saintess. Her heart would also beat wildly. The emperor didn't know his good brother was a woman, so he didn't think he was being framed. This bear man became her. She actually became a member of the protagonist group. It wasn't until Ji Yu Pei appeared that Siddle finally started. That person used some unknown means and could forcibly control her body. Every time she saw Yuna, her mood would become extremely bad. Even though Yuna was always thinking about her, even though her heart was beating erratically. But she was still worthy of people's hearts. It was hard to finally see Rosetta. The three of them had just chatted for a few sentences when Yuna entered the seat. Little Luo told Ziyu Cha that you and His Majesty had an agreement to be human. The words "interview" and "do not allow outsiders to interfere" made the air freeze for a long time. The high priest finally spoke wisely. She accidentally overheard the conversation between the two ladies. She mistakenly thought His Majesty had prepared a banquet for the saintess. And when she heard the high priest's reply, said, Yuna could express her demands with relief. To this Shiduo's disappearance was useless. It could be said that An was no longer able to lead. She was rude and had no manners. She thought she could sponsor a private banquet just by recognizing it. I heard you came from another world. Didn't you learn any etiquette in that spiritual world? Can the saintess just barge into a private restaurant? Yuna felt wronged for a moment, so she covered her eyes and cried. She promised there would be no more flaws. But in the end the two of them stayed and ate together. Seeing the saintess eating heartily, Rosetta tried to break the ice. She asked if she still recognized her. Hearing this, Yuna immediately became free. She couldn't tolerate Rosetta's emotional problems. She was curious about the meaning of the entanglement of the lover based on. As soon as this was said. But Rosetta, who was kindly trying to talk to her, didn't know how to respond. Vivian couldn't stand it. She was already familiar with the saintess. Since she didn't want to leave, she would do something. But as Vivian was about to get up and leave, Zyzel thought of a change in treatment. She ordered Vivian to do something in a commanding tone. After being refused by the girl, her voice did not become light either. She kept her own. After realizing something was wrong, she quickly kissed her own mouth. Rosetta also noticed something was wrong and quickly stepped forward to restrain Shiduo Jin. Today's gathering ends here. We will visit you alone next time. Then with Vivian, whose face was extremely bad, she left the vortex seat. Looking in the direction they left, Shiduo kept saying, I am sorry. After the gathering they dispersed. Shiduo was immersed in pain. Yuna watched from the side. Then she started to care about Shiduo's situation. Everyone was spreading rumors about Miss Good. After all, she is his fiancée. And she just went to live with Duke Aster. I heard that you have been close to your fiancé and the Duke since childhood. But if you don't know this relationship, I would have thought Miss Good and Duke Aster were the ones. Hearing this, Shiduo was furious and shouted at Yuna to shut up. If you want to stay in the palace, speak politely. When Vivian and Rosetta left, Shiduo finally realized that his body had abnormalities. He didn't know why he was so angry. But at that moment he finally gained the power of his mission. An unknown force within had been controlling his body. Even Vivian and Rosetta, he couldn't react at all. Recently there have been rumors outside that he likes the Phoenix woman. Turned around and was with Vivian again. The other two were between them. But only he knew, Vivian was nothing more than a relationship without four people to him. The saintess was even less likely. Every time he was in the same space as Yuna, his state would always become very strange. But he firmly believed that such a restless mood could never be love. On the contrary, Rosetta, if he were to get engaged to Vivian, he should bless her. But why did he feel a sense of jealousy? Cider believed himself to be the blade of yin, and on the other side Rosetta had been talking. After Lee Yuna appeared, there wasn't much change. But now he felt something was wrong everywhere. The great difference from childhood had appeared, an irreparable rift. What Vivian said made him even more uneasy. Everything in the eyes of the disabled woman sitting opposite him. All the saintesses had no idea. His intuition told him it was a very dangerous one, although there was a possibility of misjudgment. But Rosetta knew Vivian's true nature, having seen too many endings. Every woman who moved people's hearts. In short, Vivian's words were incomprehensible. Rosetta's heart was not steady. At the same time, the Huang Palace maiden, Yuna, also seemed to agree. She was also fiddling with something in her hand. She clearly tried so hard to please His Majesty. But why did His Majesty have to scold her in front of everyone? The great priest of sacrifice told her not to worry because everyone would love you. Yuna was confused and didn't understand. His Majesty doesn't like you at all. The smile on the great priest's face did not diminish. His Majesty stood there without crying. Aunt, the blessing I give you will never be wrong. This move turned her into the deeply affectionate second male lead among the male and female leads. Her kind and difficult to distinguish appearance actually made her the object of contention between the two male gods. The heartbroken male lead sent her flowers, while the paranoid and possessive villain, even more so, he wanted to monopolize her as his confidant. Once the Duke's mansion issued a recruitment order, only to select the highest quality private butler for Duke Aster. Since none could be found within the castle, Rosetta expanded the scope to outside the castle, regardless of scholarly background, as long as they were excellent enough. But upon seeing the content on the flyer, everyone sighed. Could this be some new type of scam? Duke Aster is recruiting a private butler. How could there be no requirement for background? Hey kid, is the content on the flyer true or false? Did those people involved in illegal transactions ask you to post it here? The man vehemently refuted it's true, because there was no suitable person in the mansion, so the Duke sent him out to recruit. As soon as he finished speaking, there was another sigh from the crowd. Those from prestigious families have withdrawn. How could commoners like us be chosen? He was speechless, although he knew this would be the outcome. But he still followed the head butler's instructions. Unexpectedly, as soon as he left, the flyer was blown to the ground. A person wearing a flying suit slowly picked it up, muttering constantly, "My Lord Duke, we will meet again soon." And at the same time, on the other side, Aster Castle was already crowded. Rosetta was curious where Edmund had posted the recruitment notice. The people who came were like interviewing at a large company. Just as they were about to enter the office door opened before they could reach it. Edmund's voice seemed to come from deep within the room. so the person who opened the door could not possibly be him. Rosetta immediately became vigilant. He bumped into someone and turned to say sorry, but found only his personal maid standing behind him. A light sentence echoed in his mind, "Hello, Duke," making Rosetta feel inexplicably familiar. She imagined Edmund walking out of the office. Was there someone behind me just now? No, Edmund said he didn't see anyone when he came out. That's strange. Could it be that he was hallucinating from the chaotic events he had just experienced? And since that banquet, to avoid overthinking, Rosetta locked herself in the study every day, improving her professional skills. Her father had told her, as long as she mastered the flame spirit technique, she could become an excellent necromancer. In the original work, necromancers could command corpses and control poisons. They were known as dark mages and summoners of the dark. Her father had warned her, she should not easily remove the magical items that restricted her abilities. But now her father had passed away. Rosetta thought it was time to take it off. The moment the magic was released, purple smoke engulfed her. Rosetta felt a bit strained. This powerful force was suffocating her. She suddenly remembered that her father had also released his abilities here. Every time that happened, his fingers would turn pitch black. When your fingers turn black, I will tell you a new place. Rosetta suddenly realized Mother's battle situation. Where could the new place father mentioned be? The places he often stayed were only his bedroom and the rooftop. Especially the rooftop, his father never let anyone in there. Even his own daughter was not allowed. Rosetta was overjoyed. That's right, it was there. But when he reached the roof, as long as Ano is left behind, he might be able to find the new place his father mentioned. But people's information isn't free. Ano made a request. As long as you don't kick me out, I'll tell you about the traces. Rosetta knew clearly as long as she held Ano's hand, it would be harder to break ties with her in the future, but she didn't hesitate at all. Resolutely reached this deal, and so the next morning, Rosetta immediately announced Ano's new butler. After that, Ano kept his promise. Once again brought Rosetta to the top floor, pointing a finger at a place. The color of the bricks here is different from elsewhere, is that all? Ano pondered for a moment. There are traces here, but the mystery cannot be seen, so she thought of an idea. With a brilliant magical glow, a large hole was instantly blasted in the wall. Seeing Rosetta's slight worry, she said not to worry. I used magic, no one can hear the commotion here. Rosetta had to rest assured and planned to walk into the mysterious tunnel. But seeing Ano also wanted to go, she still couldn't quite accept it. So she stopped her outside the cave. Don't follow me. Ano looked wronged but obedient. The deeper she went, the darker the light became. The moment Rosetta lit a torch, she saw that at the end of the cave there was actually a shining door. Upon opening it, she discovered a new world, not only filled with various poisons, but also a large pile of animal specimens. Rosetta was utterly shocked. Father indeed had many things he hadn't fully explained. In the original novel, Rosetta only appeared when the heroine was present, and most of her appearances were either to say a few words to the heroine, or to look at her with eyes full of affection. Therefore there were many things about Rosetta that she hadn't figured out yet. And soon she discovered a locked black book. No matter how hard she tried, the chain showed no signs of damage. Rosetta put her wooden head back in place and scanned the surroundings carefully again. Finally, on the bookshelf next door, she found a book corresponding to Nightman's magical abilities. The introduction on it was even more shocking. Although dead, there is still life. The undead life described on it refers to a resurrected corpse, meaning she could create an undead army with corpses, but to others it would probably look like a demon. Suddenly there was movement outside the door. Rosetta was startled, quickly closed the entire book and shouted at the person outside the door. I told you not to come in casually, but Ano still looked smug. Shuji's letter in his hand changed the subject. Rosetta instantly exploded. Aren't you going to hand it over quickly? The man suddenly changed his expression. Why are you talking like that? Which master would speak respectfully to their butler? The man shrugged. Rosetta quickly snatched the letter from his hand, but the name on the envelope made her wait in surprise. She wanted to understand the situation further in history, but it seemed there were still many things to deal with if the undead were taken out. It would definitely cause many misunderstandings. For safety's sake, she only took one book that seemed more educational, and instructed Ano not to enter history after walking outside. The large cage on the wall gave Rosetta a headache. Seeing the Duke's little thoughts, Ano smiled indulgently. Then he packed up and jumped back to restore the place to its original state. He raised his hand slightly. The next second the wall was restored to its original state. But how could this be opened? As long as Ano calls out this name, this stone wall will automatically open. I hope that when the Duke says that name, he will inadvertently remember me. 3 exquisite envelopes were placed in front of her. Besides Vivian and Seidel's letters, there was also Duke Castia's, that child who had the ability to control plants. After reading Vivian's letter, Rosetta could already guess what Seidel's letter would say. In a few days a banquet will be held in the palace. The purpose is to celebrate the arrival of the Saintess, but before the banquet begins, Seidel wants to meet him alone, and Rosetta also hopes that the person she has always misunderstood as a eunuch police. Meanwhile, on the other side, a group of people were slowly approaching Esther Castle. The woman in the sedan chair called out to one of the men. Did you deliver the letter to Duke Esther? After receiving an affirmative answer, the woman fell into a brief contemplation. I really want to know what the child from that year would be like now. But if he grew up in their Cadia family, he probably wouldn't be so secretive now. Thinking of the butler, he harbored unusual thoughts towards his master. And all of this was discovered by the guests who came from afar. To confirm the specific time of Duke Kadia's visit, at Rosetta's request Aino transformed into a crow and went out to investigate. And without the disturbance of the old Mont's gold, Rosetta could finally enjoy a moment of clarity. But everything about the Duke of Kadia kept lingering in her mind. Due to the family tradition passed down through generations, the women of the Kadia family were all very powerful. Even as women they could still freely assume the position of Duke. However, the Esther family happened to cross paths with them. Due to the idea of valuing men over women, she had to hide her true self all along. Even her best friend was kept in the dark by her. Thinking of this, Ino suddenly appeared before her. She saw through her troubles at a glance, and Rosetta, who had intended to push her away, regretted how she had revealed her unusual body. Perhaps a large hand then covered her face. The Duke seemed to be having a hard time. Rosetta couldn't understand why Ino could always be so perceptive and grasp everything. Or perhaps she was only like this towards her. Due to her upbringing, Ino had gone through many hardships. Rosetta guessed that in the original work, her obsession with humor was perhaps just a desire to experience an ordinary life. So she told Ino that as long as she was here she was one of them. No matter what happened or what troubles she had, Ino could confide in her. However, the appointed date soon arrived. Rosetta changed dozens of outfits early in the morning. And during the waiting period, Ino was also racking her brain to find a change. Not receiving a response from Rosetta, she sat aside sulking. Rosetta sighed inwardly. Whenever she was alone with Ino, the man would reveal his true nature. But at this moment, Rosetta discovered a curse within the spirit. The caster's spiritual power was strong. And the more types of curses they could use, including hypnosis, brainwashing, fabricating memories, and even conjuring illusions. These impressive magic spells described in the book were things her father had never taught her. But at this moment, the Duke of Kadia and her husbands all arrived. Ino said she would go to greet the guests, but the Duke of Kadia was no ordinary noble. Rosetta was worried at first, not knowing if Ino could handle such distinguished guests. However, all her worries were unfounded. Ino's smooth and efficient handling meant she didn't need to worry too much. And the Duke of Kadia was still the same as before. Rosetta couldn't tell that she was already over 40 years old. And those robust muscular men she guessed were likely the Duke of Kadia's husbands. Seeing this scene, it would be a lie to say Rosetta wasn't envious. At this moment, Ino noticed someone peeking and immediately revealed a smile without concealment. In the reception room, Rosetta got straight to the point and asked about her lineage. And the usually aloof Duchess surprisingly showed a friendly side. She was curious about what the child she saw as a child had grown into. And in her opinion, Rosetta looked exactly like her mother Sane. Hearing the familiar name after a long time, Rosetta was stunned. Everyone had always said she looked like her father since she was little. So hearing for the first time that she looked like her mother, Rosetta couldn't help but feel a difference, but she was even more curious. What was the relationship between this Duchess and her mother? Seeing this, the Duke of Kadia began to explain. Sane was her concubine before coming here. She had grown up with her since childhood. The Kadia family and the Esther family had had trade relations for generations. But during one trade, Sane unexpectedly fell in love at first sight with Caligo Esther. After learning about her mother's past, Rosetta's mind was still filled with questions. Why did the Esther family generations need things from Silva? The Duke of Kadia trembled with anger. No wonder Rosetta had never visited her. It turned out it was all Caligo's doing. After some explanation, Rosetta finally understood that her father's positions in Silva were related to his own abilities. And at Rosetta's request, the Duke of Kadia told her everything Caligo had received. As the sun set to thank the Duke of Kadia for the information, Rosetta intended to give her some gifts. How many husbands do you have? I will prepare one for each of them. Hearing this, the Duke of Kadia chuckled upstairs. She didn't have that many husbands, only 5 who came and went. But the first moment she arrived here, she noticed that Rosetta had a very capable housekeeper. Even she was envious. Rosetta almost blurted out for her to take him home. But the Duke of Kadia immediately added that she wasn't interested in other people's flowers. She also told Rosetta not to worry. In our Silva, copies are everywhere. And on the other side at the same time, Yuna was dreaming of replacing Vivian and becoming the new socialite. The beautiful blessings bestowed by the priest were a dreamlike paradise for the saintess, but a nightmare-like burden for the emperor. Yuna felt smug about this. Since descending here and becoming the saintess, she had been enjoying everyone's adoration at all times. Even Vivian, who was originally the socialite and was easily trampled under her feet. Everyone was convinced that the saintess would surely replace Miss Good and become the new flower of society. And after a few days of Chin Xing's praise and admiration, Rosetta had initially mastered the use of curse power. She used the skeleton beside her as a small blue mouse, and as the curse words were chanted, the human model, which had no holy order characteristics at all, actually began to flow strangely. But the magic did not last long. Rosetta's color changed completely. The moment the model fell apart, she spat out 5 kilograms of fresh blood from her mouth. After much thought, she thought that perhaps the magical items on her body. Scheider's eyes rekindled with life, and then he began to recount recent events. Whenever he was alone with the saintess, he couldn't control his emotions and body. Scheider initially suspected he liked Yuna, but he soon realized something was wrong. Although he didn't know the specific reason, he could clearly feel that he had become a puppet, so he was very unhappy. Rosetta didn't feel anything unusual about herself, but as long as she was by Yuna's side, everyone would see strange things. Vivian said Yuna was pretentious while Shider said he had become a puppet and Rosetta herself seemed to be trapped by Aid all along. Notice details. Shider did not fall in love with Yuna as in the novel, nor was he in an adversarial relationship with Vivian. As a supporting character he had been shuttling around the protagonists. Since everything had changed, would Yuna also be like this? Shider was immediately told not to worry and that everything would be left to her. At the same time, Vivian also appeared. Since they had just quarreled that day, it was indeed awkward to meet now. After a moment Vivian made up her mind and apologized to Shider with her head down. She was too blatant that day. This is a gift to make up. If you don't like it, just throw it away. Shider said he liked it very much and should NT have gotten so angry. Then Rosetta and Vivian entered the venue. The moment they appeared, all eyes were on them. Those people even slandered the two without hesitation. As expected, there was something unusual. After the first dance, the Duke who was supposed to be yours came over again saying some crocodile tears. Rosetta was about to find an opportunity to escape, but when she turned around she bumped into someone who should have been at the Duke's mansion. Aino appeared, wearing a very expensive-looking outfit. She was about to step forward to ask the reason, only to find that the person had a companion lady today. Since this was the case, she also happened to need Aino. Since they met, you might as well help me with something. Seeing the man suddenly stunned, the person who always startled her was startled in return, which was quite interesting. However, at this moment the Grand Priest entered hand in hand. Aino was responsible for monitoring the entire venue during this banquet. As the master's butler, she was captivated by another woman. When the Madonna smiled and gave her a new name, my heart suddenly began to beat non-stop. After receiving Rosetta's instructions, the originally playful Aino also became serious, her eyes fixed on Yuna. The long unseen Duke Grey approached her with a smile and greeted her. Noticing the person standing not far away with snow-white hair and misty pupils, Rosetta knew the other party's identity at a glance. It's a pleasure to meet you, Duke Elif Snow. He felt the warmth from the other party's palm like the warmth of the northern region under his jurisdiction. Duke Grey hoped Rosetta could act as a matchmaker for him. With a familiar introduction he could get acquainted with the Saintess faster. But he wasn't familiar with the Saintess and didn't want to do such troublesome things. Unexpectedly during the conversation Yuna disappeared. Not long ago Aino was fighting dealing with the surrounding noble ladies while completing the task assigned by Rosetta. The Saintess was leaving, but the accompanying ladies insisted on sticking to her. She said she needed to be excused for a moment. As expected, only by being fierce like this would the ladies go too far. Aino also smiled. This was the effect she wanted. Unexpectedly, after a moment's delay, the Saintess had already disappeared. Aino looked around and finally found a pair of feet not far away. She was talking to her. For some reason she was still not competitive. Yuna said she knew she was being pretentious, but she couldn't help it. Her feet hurt. Seeing that the other party was cold to her, Yuna began to introduce herself and then asked about Aino's feelings. However, she suddenly fell into thought. She had a name, but she hoped that only Rosetta would call her that. But the other party misunderstood that she didn't want to say it. She said it was okay. I heard that at such times you can give the other person a new name. The man was unhappy. Moreover, he found that as long as he looked at her, his head would spin and his heart would inexplicably skip a beat. How about Adrian? I'll call you Adrian. What's going on? She clearly had a name Aino, but she was still moved by Adrian. Finally she understood why Rosetta asked her to monitor the Saintess. Like Emperor Shider, she now felt that her emotions were being manipulated. Although she could still resist, she could sense that her willpower was gradually weakening. Stop calling me that name. Before, when she killed her master, Aino also took a book that recorded a magic that could control others' emotions. The current situation could not continue, but she was extremely sensitive to magic and could not see any trace of magic. Yuna kept holding herself. Adrian, do I need to? Can you shut up? Don't give me such a stupid name. Aino's teeth dug into her flesh and she was extremely angry. With the Emperor's entrance, the banquet held for the Saintess began. However, Yuna, who had left, did not return. The introduction session was temporarily interrupted. However, at the same time, Duke Grey of Uni smiled and approached her again, inviting her to the party tomorrow. Since it was a gathering of dukes, Rosetta readily agreed. When she found a corner where no one would disturb her, the surroundings suddenly became quiet. The Grand Priest stood on the stage introducing the long-awaited Saintess. She was very nervous and cold sweat dripped from the edges of her face. Her fingers couldn't stop twisting as she recited the solemn and sacred lines. The Emperor did not know that his good brother was a woman disguised as a man, but he was surprised by the other man who had just approached. Not long ago, Rosetta came to the balcony to relax. She let out a sigh. Aino, who was flying like a crow, turned into a human in the next moment. Aino's expression was not right. Recalling Yuna's pale face from before, Rosetta was about to figure out what was going on when the wine glass in her mouth was suddenly snatched away. After forcefully pouring it down her throat, the man reached out and touched her face, dancing wildly. Rosetta didn't know what happened to Yuna, and even the usually eccentric Aino's mind was affected. The Saintess called out Aino's name repeatedly, and only then did the man regain his senses. Rosetta wanted to know the detailed information, but Aino suddenly paused, her face full of a threatening smile. She leaned into Rosetta's ear and whispered, "A guest has arrived." Shider's face was already pale. "What are you two doing?" Rosetta was surprised by her good friend's sudden appearance. "Shouldn't you be inside now?" "Why? Should NTI come?" "Rosetta, I followed you. But why are you with her?" I remember you clearly said you would never see her again. Aino's expression immediately became aggrieved, but she quickly leaned on her master's supervision, her eyes already showing provocation. Rosetta knew she was deliberately trying to anger Scheider, and she had no choice but to indulge her. Stop messing around, Scheider said, looking very anxious. Rosetta said she wasn't being difficult either. After all, Aino was her personal butler. She didn't understand why Scheider disliked Aino so much, but Rosetta explained it in detail. Before, she had conducted many interviews and assessments to punish her personal butler, but in the end only Aino made her feel at ease, so she decided to hire her. Unexpectedly, Scheider still didn't buy it. If you need someone, I can carefully select someone from the palace and send her to the Duke's mansion. Did you have to hire her? I also want to ask your majesty this question. Did you have to hire Aino? To deal with subordinates is my authority. Perhaps there was a small misunderstanding when you first met, but Aino has been very dedicated to her. You don't need to worry about it. Scheider pointed to the figure not far away. This slovenly appearance made her feel inexplicably disgusted. Aino, who always maintained a perfect image in public, was so casual in front of her good friend. Although she was used to this, Scheider was not. Rosetta knew she minded, but they couldn't argue forever. Moreover, Aino always deliberately interrupted Scheider's persuasion. Aino, go out. This is an order. Looking at Aino's appearance, Rosetta guessed she wouldn't obey obediently. She tried to recall Aino's preferences in her mind. Let me comb your hair for you. The Mont's eyes immediately lit up, and only then did he obediently listen. How about it? Let's go back to the previous topic. Why do you hate Aino so much? But she didn't know. Scheider didn't understand his inner thoughts, but he still poured out his heart to Rosetta. After solving the problem, they both smiled unconsciously like children. They always quarreled over trivial matters in the past, especially Vivian and His Majesty. In Scheider's eyes, Vivian was like a pitiful younger sister, so he always wanted to bully her. Then what about me? Vivian is like a sister to His Majesty, so what am I to His Majesty? The man suddenly looked at her. No matter how Rosetta called him, Scheider didn't respond. It was too disappointing. It seems I am not important. Yes, Scheider followed you, and his gaze always dodged. It was you that. What does that mean? Rosetta didn't understand, but the atmosphere inadvertently froze. Unexpectedly at this moment, Vivian's scream came from the banquet. Rosetta's face instantly turned pale. Her most beloved sister was publicly humiliated, but Princess Esther, who had always favored her. While the three were in a love triangle outside the banquet, they would also quarrel with Vivian. Those who were curious about the Saintess were surrounding her with fake affection. Rather than continuing to linger here, Vivian would rather go find her good friend. She was about to leave the venue first, but at this moment someone suddenly grabbed her. What does it mean? Rosetta didn't understand, but the atmosphere inadvertently froze. Unexpectedly at this moment, Vivian's scream came from the banquet, and Rosetta's face instantly turned pale. The most beloved sister was publicly humiliated and helpless, but Princess Esther, who had always favored her. At the same time as the three-person hellscape outside the banquet, they would also quarrel with Vivian. Those who were curious about the Saintess but feigned sincerity and surrounded her, Vivian would rather go find her good friends than continue to linger here. But she had originally planned to leave the venue first. Who would have thought that at this moment? Someone suddenly grabbed her. Miss, where do you want to go? Vivian is the villainess in the novel, and she also hates the Saintess very much. Vivian's outburst, is it because the situation in the novel has occurred? Rosetta, who had just returned to the venue, heard only voices slandering and cursing Vivian. It's fine to have a bad temper, but she even provoked the Saintess and played with people's feelings at will, which is simply too bad. The moment Vivian was found, there was a low pressure all around the girl. But when she heard Rosetta's call and saw Rosetta's voice, the originally serious expression instantly bloomed into a smile. But there were more traces on her face that should NT be there, staring at a dead woman. The usually gentle Duchess Ansky, who did this to her. Jealousy and envy led to petty tricks, but who knew that the other party was not like this at all? She just grabbed it and then hid in the high priest's arms and whimpered, and Vivian was the one who got beaten. The onlookers who knew the inside story were all running with the Saintess. As soon as Rosetta woke up and moved, Vivian suddenly blocked her body. High Priest, the reason you are staying here is to educate the Saintess from the same world. High Priest, you are trying to conceal it. After all, the Saintess lived in another world before. It is not honorable for you to adapt to the living habits here, so please understand more. Vivian's gloomy face. It's not impossible for her to understand, but this still requires an environment. This family is not considered to have been tricked when it was returned, but considering that she is the Saintess, she will only be grateful this time. Jealousy made her eyes round, and Vivian gave her an hour. Just now you seem to treat them as objects. Let me use them as a comparison. But if you want to know the answer, should you ask me? After all, the one who likes me is Duke Ansky and His Majesty. In the deserted garden, Vivian's restless heart finally relaxed. She thought she would be reprimanded by Rosetta for being too impulsive, but the other party encouraged her for doing well. The moderate faction that turned big things into small things and small things into two actually recognized her decision for the first time. Finally, with Rosetta, the progress of things slowed down, and the Saintess wanted to shape her into a villainess. So she went along with the plan and taught that perpetrator a harsh lesson like a villainess. The sensible look of her sister made Rosetta feel sorry for her. However, the other party suddenly leaned into her ear and told her that the Saintess was not an ordinary person. After Yuna slapped her, she started crying by herself. She didn't have time to say anything. Yuna had already fallen into the High Priest's arms. She was trembling all over as if she had bullied her and everyone was on her side. But Yuna smiled at her in the high priest's arms. For the first time she was driven crazy by the young duke, and the man eagerly responded to the other party. She liked the quality of being controlled by Rosetta, but the other party was not like that. What Rosetta wanted to know was only information about the Saintess. After a conversation with Vivian, she knew that the Saintess was not a good thing at all. Every good show of Yuna was to isolate Vivian, to make Vivian the villainess in the original text again. So the moment she returned to the Duke's group, she inquired about Ino's previous investigation. But the other party's expression was not very good, and Ino took the initiative to unlock the gift for his master. So where is your coat? Upon learning that it was lent to Vivian, she actually saved the gift. Then she left Rosetta without looking back. No matter how the other party called her, she refused to turn her head. Rosetta was inexplicably speechless and hit Ino against the wall. How is the thing you were asked to do? The man blushed and his heart pounded. She was about to reach out. Rosetta quickly left again. She secretly regretted it and answered Rosetta's question again. If it weren't for considering your grace the Duke, I would have directly snapped that woman's neck. When Ino told her the whole story, Rosetta found that Yuna was even more defiant than Vivian said. Yuna used the name Adrian to broadcast. Suddenly Ino created a wave of brothers. Although it was very similar to temptation magic, Ino could be sure that it was not magic, because she didn't see any traces of magic use. Rosetta felt that it was unusual. If explained by the coercive force of the novel, she still felt a little light, but Ino gave another answer. Curse or assistant, the difference between these two is very small. It's only on the caster's side. For some people it's a blessing, but for others it's a curse. Ino suspects that the Saintess is just a medium. The real culprit is someone else. If you can't break this curse, let me kill it. Every time she looks at the Saintess, Ino's heart is filled with those false emotions. This case is very interesting, and so far it has not been affected. Only Rosetta, in order to find the truth of the matter, she decided to go to the secret pen again, where she found a book similar to Ino's. The most similar book to Shidir's experience is the Curse of Cholera. It records how to break the curse. It is very simple to break the Curse of Cholera. It only requires the sedmen element, which is a mixture of 4 materials. After looking for books all day, Rosetta's whole body was numb. But hard work pays off. She found the herb diagram described in the book. Taroba petals, Tanidiko, root of illusion. As long as you know it's a curse, everything becomes much simpler. Excited and enthusiastic, Rosetta even wanted to give Ino some family. She remembered that Ino was waiting obediently at the door when she came up. Isn't she still waiting for herself? She opened the door. And on the day of the Duke's party, Rosetta arrived as expected. Except for Esther having no gifts. Its 3 great ducal families respectively managed the West, North and South, precisely because the first emperor granted a ducal autonomous region, so even the emperor could not enter and exit the Duke's gift at will. Among the medicinal water source materials Rosetta needed, the blood crystal came from the north. She had long guessed what Duke Snow needed, but Esther's grain output was not much. She couldn't trade grain like Duke Grey. Seeing that Duke Snow was about to leave, Rosetta followed him closely, keeping pace with the climate. Duke Snow, I want to make a deal with you. Even though it was a precious blood crystal that was hard to find. But Rosetta had a gift she had to get, and she could pay a reasonable reward. Unexpectedly, the other party said they didn't need anything, and I will send someone to deliver it to you. Although blood crystals are precious, they are of no use to them. And after the transaction outside the castle, Rosetta suddenly realized. Rosetta actually got back the coat she lent to Vivian. The girl lost a coat and the whole family was frantic. But no one expected that the one who stole the coat was the butler of the coat owner. The moment she saw Ino, Rosetta instinctively felt that heaven was playing a trick on her. The coat she lent to Vivian 2 days ago, the man had taken it at some point. Ino looked smug and satisfied. If you ask, I can also put the coat back with magic. Hearing this, Rosetta covered her mouth and said, don't talk nonsense anymore. Let's talk about it when we get back to the mansion. But after she let go, she became wronged. The moment she turned around, Rosetta saw Duke Neji waiting for the Yi. She wanted to buy a position but didn't know how to ask. But the other party saw through her thoughts at a glance, and said that Duke Esther was always welcome to visit. Vivian searched for a long time but still couldn't find Rosetta's coat. Looking at the little princess who was anxiously shedding little pearls, the incantation was in chaos and a wave of controversy ensued. The head of the family and his entourage heard the news, and the local leader bore the brunt of his daughters separating her from Rosetta when she was young. So Dad, you took the coat from my room, right? Or it was my brother? After getting a negative answer, Vivian was disgusted. She didn't need to think to know. This must be related to Duke Esther or His Majesty. But soon she called out to her brother and approached him step by step. The man was overjoyed to be taught by his sister before his parents. But his sister asked him if he could snap his fingers, which was so difficult. He had not only never learned it, but it was impossible for him to learn it all. But it was his precious sister's request, so he decided to try. But in the end he found nothing. It's not realistic to say it was a thief. Their house is surrounded by a magic barrier. Who would dare to trespass? Although his brother didn't find it, fortunately he had called a magician in advance. As long as the magician arrived, everything would be revealed. Just as the man was about to mention the recent rumors about his sister, Vivian rushed out first. He was helpless, but still followed his sister. The moment she arrived here, she found that there were intruders in Marquis Goud's mansion. At the entrance he found traces of Shiwei's magic. So you haven't lost anything? Vivian lost a coat, but a powerful magician. How could an intruder in the Marquis mansion only take a coat? Entering an uninhabited cemetery, 2 uninvited guests arrived. The guards called out to Amu and ordered the person behind him to pay close attention to the surroundings. He slowly approached one of the graves. The moment the spell was uttered, all the white bones emerged from the ground and stood up as if alive. Rosetta didn't use her abilities as much this time, and the range of magic had increased. A bad idea suddenly came to mind. Rosetta then abandoned her defense and instantly used forbidden magic on Amu. He could now freely use magic and use his abilities on different targets consecutively. Amu could have broken this level of curse power himself, but he was afraid that the little duke would be injured, so you should break it for me. And in order to find the raw materials for the antidote potion, Rosetta had to go to Silva without anyone knowing. In order not to let everyone notice anything unusual, he decided to inform one of Shida or Vivian in advance. But when he learned that Rosetta was going out with the butler, Shida felt inexplicably displeased. In order to make a magic potion to break the curse, the little duke decided to set off for Silva immediately. But when he heard that he was going out with the butler, Ken Jing was upset about this, knowing that Rosetta was going on a long trip. And finally a normal play emerged. Fortunately Rosetta didn't ask him about the coat, otherwise he wouldn't know how to explain. Shiger was clearly not on the same wavelength as Wei Wyan, since the host had already left the guest. Also didn't stay long. The girl had noticed from the beginning, Your Majesty, your expression is not good. He touched his head and found that he hadn't found anything, and the other person had only thought of Rosetta from the beginning. The first time he met the other person, Shiger knew that the other person was a girl with a dead heart and a strong desire to live. She had a calmness beyond her years, and those light earth-colored eyes were so inappropriate. Recently Rosetta felt that she and Wei Wyan had more and more things, and the root of all this was related to the thoughts of that mysterious family, but Wei Wyan and her thoughts were different. In the girl's heart, Rosetta was like a mother, always watching with those eyes that knew everything. So no matter what Rosetta said, even if she said water was, Wei Wyan would believe it without any reason. Shiger felt inexplicably relieved to be able to make the orphaned Wei Wyan say such mature words only. Rosetta could do it. Wei Wyan didn't know what Shiger was worried about, but one day Rosetta would tell her. So don't always hide and hold things in your heart. What if someone always clings to Rosetta and cries endlessly? Your Majesty, you don't know yet, you are an extremely caring and important person. Although it's much better now, it used to be like this, always getting lost in one's mind. Shiger wanted to retort something, but then he hummed a little tune and walked out the door. But before midnight, Wei Wyan seemed to have thought of something again and did something strange and playful. The man said that Rosetta didn't mention it because the Duke was conquering me in her heart. Seeing Shiger's face change drastically, her lips and cheeks curled up and she repeated one. That's right, it's me and the Duke. In the novel, the male protagonist who loved the Saintess deeply now has an unusual short-term affection for Duke Esther, who is the second male lead. He even followed the villain's provocation all the way to success. Not long after Wei Wyan and Shiger left, Rosetta prepared to set off for Xie, but she waited for a long time and found that the carriage had not moved. When she lifted the curtain, she found that the butler was lecturing Ano. In the past, Ano would have definitely shown on the spot. Although it was rare to see the man make a promise, she still decided to tease him a little. She called out, Ano, come up. But after that, the other person's gaze was always fixed on her. She couldn't stand it anymore and advised the man not to stare at her anymore. Unexpectedly, Ano said he was just looking straight ahead. Shameless Rosetta moved herself to the right, but the thick-skinned Ano's gaze followed her from left to right. It's not ordinary arrogance. Can't you do it? Of course not. When a man stares at another man like that, it looks strange no matter how you look at it. Ano hesitated to speak. Before the Duke could finish speaking, Rosetta created a magic space and summoned an aggressive skeleton. Seeing his master's serious expression, the man finally doubled his efforts. She made a close-up move and it wouldn't be ordinary. Rosetta knew that the other party would not be easily intimidated, but she did not expect the effect to be so poor. Ano obediently listened, not out of fear of her abilities, but Rosetta still reminded him that there were not only the two of them here. However, the carriage had not gone far when it was suddenly stopped at the city gate. Even though he showed the golden token representing the Duke's identity, the guard still refused to let the carriage pass. In the stalemate, Rosetta had to take action herself. As she stood up, Ano acted first, reaching out to help her. Although the usually intelligent person would also reach out to help, perhaps because the other party was Ano, Rosetta chose to ignore him directly. Before she could speak, the guard looked as if he had been punished. Seeing the shining golden token, she immediately knelt on the ground. It was an order from a superior to stop anyone holding that golden token. As she spoke, she looked behind Rosetta and a bird of prey flew overhead. Nowadays only one person can control this bird, and that is the Emperor of the Empire. His good brother Shidel left all the affairs of the Empire to the Marquis of Good to handle. Rosetta did not expect that the other party would want to see Duke Kadia so much. The usually mature Emperor now looked like a child, and Rosetta couldn't help but feel a headache. Soon she noticed outside the window that Ano's killing intent was about to be hidden. Until night fell, the carriage that had been traveling all day finally stopped in a small forest. The three of them sat around the campfire and Rosetta handed a piece of meat to Shidel. The pampered Emperor seemed to have never eaten such food, but he still had no regrets about bringing Rosetta out. Rosetta smiled happily and finally sat beside Scheidel, sighing that the outside world was so beautiful, but in his eyes there was only Duke Esther. Scheidel's face turned red at some point and he forced himself to turn his head away. Looking at Scheidel, whose ears were also red, Rosetta thought he was sick. A deep rain came to Scheidel's side at some point. Ano felt the warmth from his palm and concluded that he must have a fever. Your Majesty, why don't you go back to the carriage to rest? Before Scheidel could retort, and Scheidel's handkerchief was thrown in his face. The male protagonist and the villain are scheming against each other, all for the sake of gaining the male lead's love. The emperor, who was supposed to be in charge, handed over all the affairs of the empire to Marquis Good alone. The act of running away from home made Rosetta unable to stop her opportunities. Where did the mature and stable Your Majesty go? I can't help but want to do something crazy. Are you crazy? After speaking, she found that she was also becoming a little abnormal. She wanted to know why the other party insisted on going to Xie with her, but the other party couldn't give a clear reason. And it seemed that he was also difficult to change the other party's mind. But why did you stop me? The man smiled. Sweeter than you. Of course I want to go with you. 2 people are better than 1 and 3 people are better than 2. And rather than a butler or something, it's better for me to protect you. I am not blind. So in Scheidel's heart I was so amazing. Just as he was about to show off the new magic he had recently learned. But soon he got stuck again. Everyone already thought that the power of curses was unlucky. If others knew that he could actually control accidents, he would surely be caught by the Holy Kingdom soon and would eventually have to obey the Emperor's wishes. But Scheidel had really become strange, acting without any plan, which was completely unlike his style. And not only Scheidel but Ano had also suddenly become very strange. Rosetta originally thought he would restrain himself, but she didn't expect the man to directly use magic to throw the handkerchief at Scheidel's face. While he was sweating profusely, Ano also said that Your Majesty should hurry back to the carriage to rest. Finally he said that he would guard outside and Your Majesty should go back and rest well. Sweat was pouring down Scheidel's face. Rosetta described it as enduring it. After all, being hot is better than catching a cold. But the closer they got to Xie, the more humid and stuffy the air became, and Scheidel could no longer bear it. Rosetta reached out to block Shilai's blanket, looking at the man's angry face, and said that Ainua was just worried about His Majesty. He kept saying he wasn't sick, but Rosetta didn't wake up at all. If you get sick, I have no face to go back and face the Marquis. This is really not like His Majesty. Scheidel also knows that this is not his usual self. So he also wants to figure out why he has become this way. In an unknown inn, a mysterious mist permeated and the ornaments on the table sparkled. And Rosetta also recovered her female form at some point. Looking at herself, who was both strange and familiar, he was filled with emotion. He used to think wearing men's clothes was no big deal, but wearing this false shell he couldn't get the happiness he wanted. If he had never possessed it, then abandoning the identity of the Duke would not be a difficult thing. But now he is not without anything, and he is afraid that he cannot leave these friends who are like family. It's really fake and completely reversed. The second male leads and villains are vying for attention, and the butler, who is dutiful on the surface, is in the chest of the Emperor the moment he turns around. The moment he opened the door, Rosetta found that Ainua was standing in front of his room at some point. Does he get tired of hearing the man call him my Lord Duke over and over again? However, at this moment the other party actually reached out and played with his magic props. Your earrings are not worn properly, please be careful. Rosetta pushed him away but was suddenly called back the moment she turned around. You must be careful, because I want to be the only one who knows this secret. I don't like it, and I don't want to share our secrets with others. I am an extremely possessive person and love is still difficult for me at the moment. He lifted a strand of Rosetta's hair. So I plan to understand further what kind of feelings I have for you. While eating dinner, Rosetta instinctively felt a surge of anger. Looking at the bowl full of food and the hands that the two were about to hand over. He didn't understand why they always hated each other, and he immediately lost his appetite. And Rosetta searched for a long time and finally found a bedtime story collection. This picture book about the undead records that each necromancer's power is different, and the degree of control over skeletons also varies. And an ancient necromancer even summoned a conscious skeleton. While Rosetta marveled at how amazing it was, she also fell asleep without realizing it. However, at this moment a person appeared in the empty corridor. He strode towards a place and finally stopped slowly in front of a door. But just as he was about to push the door open, another person appeared behind him at some point. Your Majesty the Emperor, what is the reason for your visit to the Duke's room? The moment Scheidel turned around, he grabbed Ainua's collar again, his eyes full of intense hatred. Ainua was not to be outdone. Why are you targeting a butler? It's really scary. Scheidel didn't take his words to heart at all. A mere butler actually had such fierce eyes. What is your purpose in staying? The idea that had sprouted just a day ago was instantly thrown to the back of her mind. He pushed the prop box in front of the man, indicating that he needed the other party to help him replenish his magic. Rarely being needed by his master, Ainua became excited for a moment. The fact that you can entrust this matter to me shows that I have somewhat entered your heart. He returned the prop that had been replenished with magic to Rosetta. Although this kind of gaze made Rosetta a little uncomfortable, she was also very shocked at the same time. She didn't expect Ainua to replenish her magic so quickly. It usually took about half a day to get it to Shu Zhe. However, the man suddenly knelt in front of her and told Rosetta that the emperor wanted to enter her room last night and almost caused a big incident. I stopped her. She took Rosetta's hand and placed it on her forehead. Looking at the man who was praising her, Rosetta was at a loss for words. You often touch that woman's hair. That's right. After receiving Rosetta's response, that crazy heart calmed down at some point. However, she touched a strand of hair that was too short and couldn't help but sigh that it would be better if it were shorter. The mont's eyes suddenly lit up and then Rosetta stood up at this moment. Are you ready to leave? Inuo said that these were small matters, and considering the upcoming journey she commandeered all the horses in Mali, and soon the group set off on their journey again, only stopping to rest for a moment when it became unbearably hot. They were not far from Silva now and the temperature was much higher than before. Inuo thoughtfully handed her water. Rosetta was unbearably hot, but she found that Inuo seemed to be fine and couldn't help but suspect that she had used magic. But on the other side, Shider casually took off his inner shirt as if no one was around. Rosetta was startled and blurted out, "Your figure is really good," but then she realized her mistake and told the truth. The man felt awkward for a moment. Shider slowly covered his upper body. When the air was completely silent, Inuo threw a corpse cloth at Rosetta's face, covering her eyes. "I see something dirty in your eyes, so I wanted to help you wipe them." A beautiful young man disguised as a man is publicly proposed to by a strange little girl, and even the male lead and the villain are jealous of her. When the emperor showed off his 16-pack abs, the air fell silent and Inuo thoughtfully sent a corpse cloth to Rosetta's face, saying that she wanted to wipe it for her because she saw something in her eyes. Soon the three of them continued on their way, and after a while they arrived at Silva. The guards at the gate discovered them and pointed their spears at them. Rosetta said that she was invited by Duke Cardia and showed her identification. The skeleton creature, his expression finally softened, and he said he would take them to see Duke Cardia. But the horses couldn't be let in, otherwise they would become food for the bandits. But halfway through he was suddenly interrupted by Shider. The guard's expression became extremely angry and he scolded them for being so impolite. As soon as Shider heard this, he was about to get angry, but Rosetta quickly stopped him, reminding him not to make a big deal out of it. Silva is relatively closed compared to the capital. Most people here probably don't know the emperor, and not only that, even the means of transportation here are very special. Looking at the furry creatures in front of them, both of them were clearly startled. Rosetta remembered that she had the same reaction the first time she came here. The scenery here was completely different from the imperial city. If there were elves in this world, he thought they would live in such a place. The woman was extremely proud of this. Their Silva had a river that would never dry up, and people built houses in trees. At the same time, Duke Cardia appeared. He didn't expect an unexpected guest to appear. "Long time no see, Your Majesty, the Emperor." The man said he was just accompanying Rosetta to treat him as an ordinary guest, but the other party beckoned and summoned more than a dozen strong men to escort him back to his room, and even Inuo, who was with him, was taken away. The Duke walked to Rosetta's side with a half smile and began to probe. Rosetta thought the other party didn't like him bringing other guests, but unexpectedly the other party asked about something else. "Which one of you two is it?" Rosetta knew that the Duke had something else to say, but she couldn't understand the meaning at all. Duke Cardia didn't say much but quietly took him to the guest room. It was exactly the same as his childhood memories. The handrail had always been kept smooth. Seeing that he was interested, Duke Cardia began to explain. A plant called lepidose had a preservative effect. As long as it was squeezed into a paste and applied to it, it would be effective. Of course, this was Silva's secret. When they sold lepidose to outsiders, they would deliberately change the name. Rosetta never expected that such an important secret would be told to her without reservation, and he always said things that were incomprehensible. "You must keep this secret. After all, you understand the importance of secrets better than others." She couldn't help but wonder if the other party knew that she was disguised as a man. Duke Cardia did not arrange for servants to attend to Rosetta. While he was troubled by the messy thoughts in his mind, a loud argument came from outside the door. The child's sharp voice pierced Rosetta's eardrums. Judging from the content, it seemed to be a little girl around 10 years old arguing with her brother, and the little girl had the upper hand. Vivian's brother was the type who would coax her no matter what she did. The situation in front of them was simply that the brother was inferior to the sister. Rosetta originally just wanted to hide behind the door and observe secretly, but she heard the little girl call Duke Cardia mom and accidentally bumped the door, making a noise. The next second, both of them looked at her. The girl's eyes were full of excitement. She rushed out of her spot and ran into Rosetta's arms, proposing to her, "Will you be my husband?" Because of the master's single sentence, "I like it," the butler cut off his 10-year-long hair and happily ran to Rosetta to ask for a reward. Little did he know that not long ago his master had been proposed to by a strange little girl. The girl's serious expression made Rosetta can't help but laugh. It was the first time she had seen such a cute proposal. However, the girl's brother looked panicked. He picked up his sister without saying a word and quickly disappeared from Rosetta's sight. Soon Rosetta arrived at the banquet hall. To avoid making everyone wait, Duke Cardia deliberately waited until the last moment. Seeing that everyone had arrived, she ordered her husband no one to prepare for everyone. However, at this moment Duke Cardia said that he had heard something interesting. "My daughter proposed to you today, right?" Shider also promised that because Naiji's eldest daughter was the heir here. However, it was not the eldest daughter Aida T who proposed to Rosetta, but her youngest daughter, Yang Yuan T. Shider felt a bad premonition. She quietly glanced at Rosetta, but she had no intention of getting married at the moment. The girl could only do so. After dinner, Duke Cardia met her alone. Before that, Rosetta found that she hadn't seen Inuo all day. She asked everywhere and everywhere. After looking at her expression, she realized that the man lived in such a remote place. But she knocked on the door again and again, but no one opened it for her. She planned to come back another day, but unexpectedly Inuo came to her with a bowl of noodles. Rosetta's expression was serious. Inuo, where have you been? The mont's smile was not yet full because he wanted the Duke to see him first, so she specially wrapped herself up tightly. However, seeing the dark, sunken and bitter expression, Rosetta felt inexplicably annoyed. When the man took off his mask, her expression changed. Inuo had actually cut her hair short and ran to her immediately to ask for praise. Very good, it suits you. Every time Rosetta praised Inuo, she would feel embarrassed. But the man was different. The butler who received his master's reply would always show a shy expression. Meanwhile, on the other side, the little JT of the main character started to act up again. Because she couldn't see the Emperor every day, she found the office. Knowing that the Emperor was not there except for Marquis Good, she called out to him. The Marquis frowned, not understanding why the Saintess and the High Priest were in the office. Yuna smiled innocently. Marquis, if it's convenient, can I go in with you? The moment she met the Saintess' gaze, Marquis Good frowned, but just as he was about to agree to Yuna, he suddenly sobered up. He refused the Saintess' request. Not now, but I will convey a message to His Majesty. Yuna gritted her teeth, not understanding why she was treated like this. She remembered that when she first arrived here, they clearly were willing to give her anything. The High Priest did not pay attention to the angry Saintess. He just stared blankly at the sky. The golden mask hovering in the sky seemed to be issuing a warning. The man suddenly realized that the Emperor was not in the palace at this moment. The secret of the little Duke's disguise as a man for many years had actually been revealed more than 10 years ago. This made all the clues traceable. When he saw the golden mask hovering in the sky, the High Priest knew that neither the Emperor nor Duke Esther was in the palace. He wrote a letter, hid it in his sleeve, and then quietly walked to a sparsely populated corner. Without intending to, he glanced at the dirt wall in the beggar's bowl and then threw a gold coin. The beggar was overjoyed and thanked the priest with kowtows. However, under the shining gold coin there was a mysterious letter. After dinner, Rosetta went to the agreed meeting place with Duke Cardia. It was from the Duke, informed that he had been waiting inside for a long time, and except for Rosetta, no one else was allowed in. The Duke of Cadia arranged to meet here because he wanted Rosetta to meet his mother. The room was spotless, indicating that even if no one lived there, it was regularly maintained. Everything seemed to be showing Rosetta how much the Duke of Cadia valued his mother. Thank you for letting me tour this place. Cian suddenly turned and caressed his face. Rosa, I should be the one thanking you for coming here. He was terrified, not expecting the other party to see through his disguise as a woman. Rosa was with Roka, his good friend Gia. Therefore Gia had written to you before. The other party named their beautiful daughter Rosa after their own surname. Roka was with Rosa. Rosetta suddenly realized. No wonder Naiji always said those